Good evening. Tonight we bring you the story of our search for one man in the vast sea of 4 million Syrian refugees who fled the civil war in their country.
Right, so what the boat number is the indication of when he arrived. For the past week, I've been attempting to make contact with anyone who knew him. Sorry, O-N-E, yeah. Finally, a face and a name. For his own safety, we've chosen to call him only by his first name. Okay. Iyad. Wonderful, I'll send you an email right now.
This is the equivalent of dropping someone in the middle of an active war zone.
So why focus on one man? Well, the scale of the Syrian catastrophe is so vast that sometimes it takes an individual tragedy to focus the collective mind on the need for compassion. So it was when these images of the body of 3-year-old Aylan Kurdi washed up like flotsam on a Turkish beach sparked global action. Here in Australia, the Prime Minister promised to help.
Australia will resettle an additional 12,000 refugees from the Syria-Iraq conflict. These will be permanent resettlement places over and above Australia's existing humanitarian program of 13,750 this year, rising to 18,750 in 3 years' time.
Well, specifically excluded from that promise were the 18 Syrians currently held in Australian detention centres both onshore and offshore. They may have escaped from the same war as the lucky 12,000, but like the vast hordes of people flooding Europe's borders, like Aylan Kurdi's family in fact, they hadn't waited in a queue in an official UN refugee camp. We've learnt that the unwanted 18 Syrians in our own detention centres are still being pressured to go back to where they came from. Mostly they refuse, protesting they'll be killed if they're forced to go back to their homeland. But one man, the 19th Syrian, decided that life confined in Manus detention centre was a worse option than the risk of death in Syria. He alone was persuaded to return to the war zone he'd run from. That was in August. There's been no word from him since then. Ginny Stein set out to find out who he is and what happened to him.
He was known as Eid-043, identified by the boat he arrived on and a number. His boat arrived on Christmas Island on the 4th of August 2013. After 1 month, he was transferred to Manus Island. We also know that Eid-043 agreed to return to his war-torn homeland after 2 years in detention. I set out to find out why he agreed to go and what happened to him. Refugee advocates in Sydney had heard of Eid-043, but since he landed in Syria, the trail had gone cold.
Since he arrived, nobody's been in contact with him. Nobody knows what's happened to him.
Right, so what the boat number is the indication of when he arrived. For the past week, I've been attempting to make contact with anyone who knew him. Sorry, O-N-E, yeah. Finally, a face and a name. For his own safety, we've chosen to call him only by his first name. Okay. Iyad. Wonderful, I'll send you an email right now. Okay, so you think if we get the boat number, we'll have a better idea, but right now the good thing is we've actually got a name. Okay, look, thanks very much. So, starting from scratch, I now have a name and I have a photo. I've also discovered that Iyad comes from the Daraa province, one of the most dangerous regions in the country. This is where the Syrian uprising began in 2011. There have been 3 anti-government offensives led by the Free Syrian Army since 2013. Rebels posted their own footage of fierce fighting against the Syrian army in Daraa province last year. Iyad's town of Al-Hara is 37 kilometres north of the main city of Daraa.
I know about Daraa province because Human Rights Watch has documented crimes against humanity in Daraa. This is the equivalent of dropping someone in the middle of an active war zone. We've documented barrel bombs being dropped by the Assad regime. There's been intense fights between the rebels and Syrian government forces. There was an intensive just a few weeks ago, which people were fleeing from across the border into Jordan. So this is certainly not a safe place to be sending someone back to.
When Iyad fled this, leaving his pregnant teenage wife behind, he thought Australia would be the safe haven from where he could send for his wife and his daughter, who was born in his absence.
Allahu Akbar.
The search for Iyad has taken me to meet relatives of those in detention in Australian facilities onshore and offshore. For 2 years, this has been the only way they've been able to communicate with him. There's only one phone in there that gets through to everyone.
Yeah, everybody else uses it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Her nephew, who was locked up with Iyad, is able to send me voice messages. He tells me about his friend.
Iyad is my friend. He's a good man. And the Australian put him here on Manus Island in the hell. Because Iyad, he was sick. He have kidneys. And no one help him here. No HMS help him here. No have any injection for him here. And he said, I want to live to Syria because I don't want dead with my family. I don't want dead in the compound jail in Manus Island.
Because he thought dying between his family and seeing his family for the last time is better than dying here between what was going on.
I asked him if he's heard from Iyad since he returned to Syria more than a month ago.
Try every day for listen any news about him, but when he entered to Syria, I didn't get anything about him, any news. I didn't know anything because I talked to him last time when he entered to Syria, and last airport in Jordan.
And look, what I've also been able to glean in the last few days is what actually happened from Manus Island to when he was last heard of, travelling to Amman and then from Amman onto Damascus. His last message was sent to one of those other guys who is in detention saying, I'm leaving now, I'm going out of range, please pray for me. But why did he return after risking his life to get to Australia by boat? What made him go back? International agencies won't send Syrians home. They haven't for 2 years. But as these emails show, the Australian government has been trying to persuade Syrians in detention to go back.
I was very open and frank with the transferees. I described the options that they have, and I was clear that they would not be settled in Australia or a third country. The transferees were visibly upset and quite anxious. They were quite adamant that I would be sending them home to their death.
I thought it's unthinkable that they would send someone back to Syria. I mean, Syria has been in the middle of a war for coming on 4 years now. The UN, the UNHCR, IOM will not send people back to Syria. They recognise any Syrian that makes a refugee claim elsewhere to be a refugee precisely because the conditions are so bad inside Syria. So I really couldn't believe it that the Australian government would be trying to go around the UN and sidestep the UN by sending people back.
From Manus Island, Sandra's nephew tells us Syrian detainees are still being put under pressure to return.
In any meeting with immigration and the transfer, they tell me this question: why you didn't go back to Syria? Why you stay here? For what you stay here? I say I cannot go back to Syria because when I enter to Syria I'll be dead because I have too many problems in Syria.
When was the last time they said that or asked you that?
Maybe 2 weeks ago. Yes.
If I am to have any hope of finding Iyad, I need to speak with those who knew him. There are 2 Syrian men in Villawood who spent time with him on Manus Island. One of them comes from the same village and made the journey to Australia with him. Cameras are not allowed in, but I'm able to take notes. I've just been in to see the last 2 men who had any contact at all with Iyad. They told me the messages that he sent them, that of his desperate attempts to escape, and that ultimately his real plan was not to go back to Syria, but simply to get off Manus Island. And that meant accepting the flight offer back towards his country, but his sole intention was to make sure that he managed to escape. But for weeks since his return, no one has heard from Iyad. His friends in Villawood remain convinced if he was alive that he would have contacted them. But they fear greatly that if he was able to make it out of the government-controlled airport, some other faction may have either killed or forcibly recruited him. A day later, a phone call from someone who's been in contact with him, and I'm given a phone number.
رقمي EDE 043.
Iyad is alive. He tells me of the anguish surrounding the choice he had to make to come back for his wife and child, knowing that the prospect of death was very much a reality.
ورجعوني على بلدي على الموت وقلت لهم إذا برجع سوريا بموت يقولوا لي ما تموت هاي مو شغلتنا هاي مشكلتك أنت مو مشكلتنا هذا اللي شفته من الحكومة الأسترالية.
2 days later, we talk again with the help of a translator. He tells me about his attempt to escape from the 2 Australian immigration officials escorting him back.
When I went to Qatar in Doha airport, I tried to escape because I want to go to Turkey.
How would escaping, if you had gone to Turkey, how would that have helped your family?
إذا أنت نجحت في شغلة الهرب على تركيا بدها تساعدك وتساعد أسرتك.
تركيا أنا فيني أعيش في تركيا مثلا في مخيم اللاجئين في تركيا.
In Turkey there is a refugee camp in Turkey, and when once I am in that refugee camp in Turkey, it's easy to get my wife and my daughter to come to live with me in that refugee camps in Turkey.
Right. And then he tells me why contact was lost with him on his return.
I was worried when I get to Syria to be killed or put in jail. And this is what happened. When as soon as get to Damascus, I was put 20 days in jail.
Syrian government intelligence officers singled him out as soon as he landed in Damascus. His home village in the province of Daraa defined him as a dissenter. For 20 days, Iyad says he was tortured.
They were hitting me on my face, on my back, on my chest, something like that.
For how long?
قديش مدة وهم يضربوك؟ قديش أخذ وقت وهم يضربوك؟
يعني مثلا ربع ساعة نص ساعة ساعة حسب.
It depends. 15 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, sometimes half an hour. Some days they never hit me.
Right. What were they trying to find out from you when they were beating you up? What did they want to know?
They were telling me that you are alleging that you were a prisoner in Manus, and you are covering the idea that you are financing the Syrian revolution.
Why did they say financing? Did you come back with money? Did Australia give you any money?
2310, exactly 2,310 US dollar.
Right. Iyad is now back with his family in Al-Harar and tells me the war continues to rage around them. His family had to move to another house after his home was bombed.
Every day, those Syrian planes come to our area once or twice. And in those times, they throw 4 barrels of explosives. And they are killing civilians, they are killing children. And you can watch the news and you can see by yourself.
Yeah. Have any landed close to you?
1 barrel filled 10 meters away from my home. One house near my house was destroyed.
Even now, living in the middle of a war, he says his life is better than it was on Manus Island.
No, I have no regret.
Why? Why do you say that?
ليش بتقول هيك? It's correct. It's correct that now I am living in liberty. I am free in my country. But when I was there in Manus Island, I was in a jail, in a prison. So I am more happy now to live in my country now than in Manus Island.
This former chicken farmer who feared he would die on Manus Island without ever seeing his daughter has fulfilled that dream.
She is 2 years old. She is very clever, and you can communicate very easily with her. She understands quickly.
You are a proud dad, I think.
يعني أنت فخور ببنتك.
كثير.
Too much,
كثير
yes.
كثير.
Too much.
But he does not have any great expectation that he will survive this war.
One day I'm expecting myself to be killed or arrested. In Syria, two sects. There are two sects. Either you are a killer or you are the killed person.